Welcome back to Roller Mark Unfiltered, broadcasting live from the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, where Forward Care is presenting their program, Men of Courage, Men of Change. Folks, let's talk about a huge issue, and that is the mental health of African Americans. When we see a lot of these police brutality cases happening all across the country, when we see stories like the one in Arkansas where this white woman pulls a gun on 4 young African Americans who are simply trying to raise money for their athletic team, this causes traumatic issues for people of color. And so we can't act as if these things do not matter, don't exist. And in fact, remember, we had the sister who was on the subway train there in D.C. who saw the cops take down this brother who was trying to help in the case of them when they stopped a couple of African Americans. Well, she talked about her mental health and what she was dealing with and what she was going through. And so we're seeing this all the time. In fact, Avis, we even have some folks who, again, are triggered when they see videos. Some people simply can't even watch these videos when they're posted on social media because of the impact they have. There's the targeting of African Americans. In a moment, we're going to talk with a mental health expert, but we have to understand that this is a significant issue, that black people are under a level of assault in this country, Avis, unlike other people.
People couldn't even watch when they see us, a fictional, well, not fictional, but a representation of a true story, right? Just because of the trauma that would induce by watching what those young men went through as young boys. And so, this is a real issue. In fact, I've read that trauma itself can be passed down through the DNA. And so it's not just a one generational impact of trauma. It can be carried on from one generation to the next generation. So for many of us, given our history in this nation in terms of the traumatic experience of the slave experience, we were born already exposed to trauma. And what happens after we're here just exacerbates the situation.
Kelly?
No, I agree with Dr. Avis, but also people don't understand that trauma affects your entire being. It's not just a mental health issue, especially with black people, because we don't have the outlet to actually express why we're traumatized or what's going on with us mentally. It affects our physical bodies. That's why we have hypertension. That's why we have, an increased rate of stroke and heart attacks and the like. It's not just, thinking and depression isn't just in your mind. Depression is a physical thing, and anxiety is a physical thing. I've dealt with depression and anxiety. I especially dealt with it when I lived in Baltimore during the Baltimore uprising, because I could see the smoke from my apartment when things were, being set aflame. And it's interesting because I was fortunate enough to actually have a therapist at that time, but so many people aren't. So many people, especially in these inner cities like Baltimore, Chicago, DC, and the like, they don't have the means, they don't have the resources, and their local governments don't have the means and resources, or even think about having the means and resources to actually help this group of people.
Right.
And just because we're people of color doesn't mean that we don't have, we're not a monolith. And we need those resources as well. So
let's go to attorney Enola Ayer. She's the founder and president of Community Healing Network. And Enola, this is obviously an issue that does not get the level of attention that it needs. When you talk about the level of trauma, the impact on black folks that they are under, when you talk about not just with police, but also you got white folks who are calling the cops left and right over any one little thing, pulling guns on black people. I mean, that stuff, you don't simply get over that so easily.
James Baldwin said that to be black in America is to live in a state of constant rage. That is not healthy. We are in a situation where we're constantly under attack. We're constantly under a microscope. Doing anything while black can be dangerous and can often be deadly. We're in a situation where we have to stop and realize that as a group, as a community, we need to take time to heal. This current manifestation of the problem is rooted in something that took place 600 years ago in the world and 400 years ago in the United States. And we're in the 400th anniversary of the first recorded forced arrival of Africans in the United States. And it is an important and propitious moment for us to say, look, we've made an incredible amount of progress against so many trials and tribulations.
The increasing occurrence of mental illness and the rampant development of specific pathological conditions are not the only legacy of the colonial war in Algeria. Apart from the pathology of torture, the pathology of the tortured and the perpetrator, there is the pathology of the entire atmosphere in Algeria, a condition which leads the attending physician to say when confronted with a case they cannot understand, this will all be cleared up once the damned war is over. We propose grouping in this fourth series the illnesses encountered in Algerians, some of whom were sent to internment camps. They can all be characterized as being psychosomatic. The name psychosomatic pathology is given to the general body of organic disorders developed in response to a situation of conflict. Psychosomatic because its determinism is psychic in origin. The pathology is considered a way the organism can respond. In other words, how it adapts to conflict, the disorder being both a symptom and a cure. More exactly, it is generally agreed that the organism, here again is the former psychosomatic cortico-visceral body, outwits the conflict using the wrong but nevertheless economic channels. The organism chooses the lesser evil in order to avoid complete breakdown. On the whole, this pathology is widely accepted today, although the various therapeutic methods such as relaxation and suggestion are highly uncertain. During the Second World War, air raids on England and the siege of Stalingrad, for example, in the Soviet Union, the number of disorders reported increased dramatically. We now know perfectly well that there is no need to be wounded by a bullet to suffer from the effects of war in body and soul. Like any war, the war in Algeria has created its contingent of cortico-visceral illnesses. Except for Group G, below, all the disorders encountered in Nigeria have been reported during conventional wars. We found Group G specific to the colonial war in Algeria, and we'll get to the different groups. The particular form of pathology, systematic muscular contraction, already caught our attention before the revolution began. But the doctors who described it turned it into a congenital stigma of the native and original feature of this nervous system, manifest proof of a predominant extrapyramidal system in the colonized. This contraction, in fact, is quite simply a postural concurrence and evidence of the colonized muscles and their rigidity, their reticence and refusal in the face of colonial authorities. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward, and continuing my reading of Frant Fanon's book, Wretched of the Earth, the second half of the last chapter, War and Mental Disorders. And I picked up on page 216 under Series D, Psychosomatic Disorders. So we're continuing to talk about the effects of war and effects of violence on people and how it causes trauma and how that trauma can manifest itself in various ways. But specifically, Frant Fanon is talking about psychosomatic disorders. And it says psychosomatic disorders is talking about the grouping of the organic disorders that can happen when a person experiences trauma. And so, once again, the name psychosomatic pathology is given to the general body of organic disorders developed in response to a situation of conflict. So there are various psychosomatic disorders that can occur. Now, in this, they're going to talk about some specific ones that they found in the Algerians. But once again, we're linking this to what also has happened to us in America. And if we think about the various or even the plethora of mental illnesses that we suffer from as Black people in America, which also can translate to our health issues as well. We're unhealthy body, mind, and soul. And a lot of that has to do with the trauma that we experienced since slavery, the continued trauma that we experience here in America. And of course, that trauma is on the spectrum because everybody has not experienced the same extent of trauma. But through my community work, I have been in environments where people are exposed to trauma on a daily basis. They're exposed to violence on a daily basis. And one thing that we're going to hit in this section is the colonial powers, and this is linking to what I'm talking about our situation here in Black America. The colonial powers suggested that criminality was natural to the Algerians, just like it was suggested here by the Europeans and the white people in America that criminality and violence was natural. It was innate to African people. Now, they neglected, or they didn't even try because of, you know, what the narratives that they were creating, but I would say they excluded the conditions that Black people have been under for the past 400 or 500 years, right? You cannot experience trauma that long and just come out okay. We know that because we have something called post-traumatic stress disorder. And when we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder in the various ways that we talk about it, people seem to understand what trauma is and how trauma can manifest to disorders. But when it comes to post-traumatic slave syndrome, or even the trauma that Black people faced globally, but more specifically, the trauma that Black people faced here in America, we don't understand that. The connection isn't there. The logic isn't the same. Somehow the logic breaks down. Somehow generational trauma does not exist. Epigenetics is the word. Epigenetics is the word for the physical generational trauma that has been passed down, right? So these are the things that we're getting at within the second half of the chapter. But understand, white supremacy is the root of all of our issues. Why are we violent toward ourselves? Well, think about the environments that have been created. Black people, they're good Black neighborhoods and they're bad Black neighborhoods. Why do Black people in the good upscale Black neighborhoods, why don't they have the same amount of violence? Why don't they have the same amount of death in the good upscale Black neighborhoods as they do in the hood? They called the projects because it was a project, because they already understood that when you put these people in these conditions, oh, they will turn out bad. The turnout will be bad. And plus, you put people who are mentally ill, or people who are suffering from epigenetics and all other sort of mental disorders, you put them in these environments, and then you know the outcome because you've done the studies. You've done the experiments. That's why it's a project, because you've done the experiments, and then you complain about it. But it's the Hegelian dialectic, though. We're going to create the problem and sell you the solution, and then convince you that you are the problem. So let's pick back up page 217. At the bottom, we're talking about some of the different symptoms. So we're going to go through the different classes of symptoms, right? So psychosomatic symptoms encountered. A is stomach ulcers. Very numerous. The pain is mainly felt at night, accompanied by severe vomiting, loss of weight, melancholia, and depression. Irritability is rare. Most of the patients are very young, between 18 and 25 years old. As a rule, whenever we advise surgery, the gastrectomy was conducted twice, and each time we had to reoperate within a year. There's also B is renal colic. Here again, the pain reaches its height during the night. Obviously, there are never any kidney stones. These colics can occur in 14 to 16-year-olds, but this is rare. C is disturbed menstrual cycles. These symptoms are very common, and we will be brief. Either the woman go Either the woman go 3 or 4 months without their periods, or menstruation is so painful it affects the woman's character and behavior. D is hypersomnia due to idiopathic tremors. These are cases of young adults who are denied any rest, owling to tiny systematic tremors resembling Parkinson's disease. Here again, some great scientific minds might be tempted to suggest an extrapyramidal determination. E is premature whitening of hair. The hair of survivors of the interrogation center suddenly turns white in patches in specific areas or all over. Very often, this disorder is accompanied by deep asthenia plus loss of interest and impotence. F is proximal. I might say this wrong, but proximal tachycardia. The heart rate suddenly accelerates to 120 to 130 to 140 beats per minute. The tachycardia is accompanied by panic attacks, an impression of imminent death, and the end of the attack is marked by heavy sweating. So this is what G is what Frant Fanon was talking about in the opening, what I was reading to you, the systematic contraction, muscular stiffness, right? These are male patients who slowly have difficulty making certain movements, such as climbing stairs, walking quickly, or running. In 2 cases, it was very sudden. The case of this difficulty lies in the characteristic rigidity, which inevitably suggests an attack on certain areas of the brain, the central gray matter. Walking becomes contracted and turns into a shuffle. Passive bending of the lower limbs is particularly impossible. No relaxation can be achieved. Immediately rigid and incapable of relaxing of his own free will. The patient seems to be made in one piece. The face is set, but expresses a marked degree of bewilderment. The patient does not seem to be able to demobilize his nerves. He is constantly tense on hold between life and death. As one of them told us, you see, I'm as stiff as a corpse. So this is a rundown, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, a rundown of certain symptoms that they were, not certain symptoms, but the symptoms that they were recognizing in the patients that they were treating or the patients that they were encountering. So once again, I'll read them again. A is stomach ulcers. B is renal colic. C is disturbed menstrual cycles. B is renal colic. C is disturbed menstrual cycles. D is hypersomnia due to idiopathic tremors. E is premature whitening of hair. F is proximal tachycardia. G is systematic contraction, muscular stiffness. So these are, like I said, these are the things that they recognized. So I'm not a mental health expert, but I know there are the common mental health disorders that we see in Black people is anxiety and depression. But of course, these are common American mental disorders, but anxiety and depression run rampant within the Black community. A lot of that is due to the environments that we exist in. Racism has done a job on us, both mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, every body that we have, and the spiritual body, the mental body, the physical body, emotional body, all the different bodies, all the different layering of bodies has been affected negatively with no real repairing. So think about, if you work in the mental health field, please, in the comments, please list some of the mental disorders, some of the common mental disorders that you see in Black people that you would attribute to them experiencing trauma, consistent trauma or acute trauma, or even from existing in a racist environment. Put that in the comments. So, but let's pick up. He says, from the North Africans' criminal impulsiveness to the war of national liberation. All right, now this is where these colonists be wilding, right? Supposed scientists ain't really that smart. So fighting for the freedom of one's people is not the only necessity. As long as the fight goes on, you must re-enlighten not only the people, but also and above all yourself on the full measure of man. You must retrace the paths of history, the history of man damned by other men, the innate bring about the encounter between your own people and others. In fact, the aim of the militant engaged in armed combat in a national struggle is to assess the daily humiliations inflicted on man by colonial oppression. The militant sometimes has the grueling impression he has to drag his people back up from the pit and out of the cave. The militant very often realizes that not only must he hunt down the enemy forces, but also the core of despair crystallized in the body of the colonized. The period of oppression is harrowing, but the liberation struggles, rehabilitation of man fosters a process of reintegration that is extremely productive and decisive. The victorious combat of a people is not just the crowning triumph of other rights. It procures them substance, coherence, and homogeneity. For colonialism has not simply depersonalized, colonized. The very structure of society has been depersonalized on the collective level. A colonized people is thus reduced to a collection of individuals who owe their very existence to the presence of the colonizer, because that is what the colonized has been reduced to. But we're also talking about, because overall, one of the main themes in this book was analyzing how a revolution happens and what is the reality of a revolution and the outcomes of a revolution and the intricate parts that go into a revolution either being successful or unsuccessful. So, he's beginning talking about during the revolution, what needs to happen to keep the revolution going on the side of the colonized people, because you're already fighting from behind, and most likely in these areas, behind enemy lines, in the sense of they control the area that you live in. Now, us here in America, we're literally behind enemy lines, meaning that we actually live behind enemy lines, right? So we're literally there. But that's when it gets to, he's saying that the colonized, the collection of the individuals, the colonized, they owe their very existence to the presence of the colonizer, because the colonizer has convinced, especially us in Black America, the colonizer has convinced us to give up everything that could make us independent. Everything that would have made us strong, everything that would have made us some type of threat, we willingly gave up in the name of integration, to integrate into the white world. Because the integration allowed others to assimilate, because that was the ultimate goal, to assimilate into white culture. Because, hey, it's easier to exist under the system of our colonizers than to create something for ourselves, because we got to start at the bottom. And how can I be somebody, especially in the eyes of the white man, when we got to start at the bottom and create our own? Not understanding that ultimately you will be admired by the world if you were to make yourself powerful, a powerful group of people. If we were to make ourselves a powerful group of people, but we refuse to, because of the mental job that has happened to us. Hey, look, racism, white supremacy, it is the greatest form of any type of supremacy that humanity has ever seen. And the psychological aspect of it is, in my opinion, one of the greatest components, and one of the components that has helped keeping it afloat, because they have basically turned us into Black white supremacists. We really believe we need our oppressor to survive. The combat waged by people for their liberation leads them, depending on the circumstances, either to reject or to explode the so-called truths sown in their consciousness by the colonial regime, military occupation, and economic exploitation. And only the armed struggle can effectively exercise these lies about man that subordinate and literally mutilate the more conscious-minded among us. The resistance of the forest and swamps to foreign penetration is the natural ally of the colonized. Put yourself in his shoes and stop reasoning and claiming that the nigger is a hard worker and the towelhead great at clearing land. In the colonial regime, the reality of the towel head and the reality of the nigger is not to lift the finger, not to help the oppressor sink his claws into his prey. The duty of the colonized subject who has not yet arrived at a political consciousness or a decision to reject the oppressor is to have the slightest effort literally dragged out of him. This is where non-compliance or at least minimal cooperation clearly materializes. Not being an ally to your oppressor, not aiding in your own oppression. We don't know nothing about that. Look at our Friday video. If you haven't checked out our breakdown on Friday, go look at our Friday video. The lady is sitting there trying to rewrite history, acting like Black people in America, Black American slaves benefited from slavery. Okay. But that's the mental job, because she is dependent upon white supremacy for her survival. She is dependent upon white supremacy for her validation. She isn't someone if white people don't say she is, which is a problem and the problem. These observations regarding the colonized disposition to work could also be applied to the colonized attitude toward the colonizer's laws, his taxes, and the colonial system. Under a colonial regime, gratitude, sincerity, and honor are hollow words. Over recent years, I've had the opportunity to verify the fundamental fact that honor, dignity, and integrity are only truly evident in the context of national and international unity. As soon as you and your fellow men are cut down like dogs, there is no other solution but to use every means available to reestablish your weight as a human being. You must therefore weigh as heavy as possible on your own torturous body so that his wits, which have wandered off somewhere, can at least be restored to their human dimension. During the course of recent years, I have had the opportunity to witness the extraordinary examples of honor, self-sacrifice, and love and disregard for death in Algeria at war. And he's talking about real freedom fighters, people who understand their position and where they are and where they're trying to be, rather than the people who are looking at their individual position and trying to find a safe place within their trying to find a safe place for their individual selves within the confines of white supremacy, which is the problem. The elite, the bourgeoisie, the nationalist, the educated class, the talented 10th, we love white people, right? Hey man, look, I'm an HBCU graduate. I grew up on the HBCU. I'm still on the HBCU campus at least once a week. I do not get down with the HBCU bourgeois because they hold us back. Bougie Black folk hold us back. Bougie Black folk who want to be accepted by white people hold us back. But remember, their minds are messed up. That doesn't mean that we have grace on them. Nah, I don't believe in that situation. Now, you want to be a sellout? We ain't having grace, but understand why they selling out. One of the characteristics of the Algerian people established by colonialism is their appalling criminality. Prior to 1954, magistrates, police, lawyers, and journalists and medical examiners were unanimous that the Algerians' criminality posed a problem. The Algerian, it was claimed, was a born criminal. A theory was elaborated and scientific proof was furnished. This theory was taught at universities for more than 20 years. Algerian medical students received this education, and slowly and imperceptibly, the elite, after having consented to colonialism, consented to the natural defects of the Algerian people, born idlers, born liars, born thieves, and born criminals. See, they believe through their so-called scientific research that Black people are just low lives. We are natural low lives. And without them, without the gracious white people, oh my God, without white people coming to save us, we'd have just eliminated ourselves. It's no wonder how the hell that all these Black people not killed themselves off before white people got there. All these elements focalizing on Yeah, that do say focalizing. That's funny. All these elements focalizing on Algerian criminality appeared sufficiently evident to support an attempted at systemization. Since similar, though less implicit, observations had been conducted in Tunisia and Morocco, reference was increasingly made to a North African criminality. For more than 30 years, under the constant direction of Professor Perrault, professor of psychiatry at the Faculty of Algiers, several teams worked on defending this criminality's mode of expression, and offering a sociological, functional, and anatomical interpretation. The main research work for the question conducted by the psychiatric school of the Faculty of Algiers will be the basis for our conclusions. Research findings conducted over more than a 20-year period were subject, we recall, of lectures given by the chair of psychiatry. Consequently, the Algerian doctors who graduated from the Faculty of Algiers were forced to hear and learn that the Algerian is a born criminal. Moreover, I remember one of us in all seriousness expounding these theories he had learned and adding, it's hard to swallow, but it's been scientifically proved. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The North African is a criminal. His predatory instinct a known fact, and his unwillingly aggressiveness visible to the naked eye. The North African loves extremes, so you can never entirely trust him. Today, and just close your eyes and imagine me replacing North African with Black American. Today, your best friend, tomorrow, your worst enemy. He is immune to nuances. He is fundamentally foreign. It says Cartesianism. Cartesianism is fundamentally foreign to him, and moderation. A sense of proportion and level-headedness are contrary to his inner nature. The North African is violent, hereditarily violent. He finds it impossible to discipline himself and channel his instincts. Yes, the Black American is congenitally impulsive. See what I could do there? But they kill us. This impulsiveness is highly aggressive and generally suicidal. This explains, they say, the unorthodox behavior of the melancholic Algerian. French psychiatrists in Algeria were faced with a difficult problem. They had been trained to fear tendencies in a patient suffering from melancholia. The melancholic Algerian, however, this disorder of the moral conscience, which is not always accompanied by self-accusation, suicidal tendencies, in the Algerian takes the shape of suicidal instincts. The Algerian suffering from melancholia does not commit. This is homicidal and melancholia elaborated by Professor Perrault in the thesis of his pupil Montserrat. So they are saying that the Algerians have these mental disorders because they are naturally impulsive, naturally melancholic, naturally, but they don't have a lot of information. They have information of them attacking each other or even attacking white people. How does the Algerian school account for this anomaly? Firstly, according to the school of Algiers, oneself is tantamount to examining one's own feeling, looking at oneself and practicing introspection. The Algerian, however, rebels against his inner feelings, right? There is no inner life in the North African. On the contrary, the North African rids himself of his troubles by attacking the people around him. He has no sense of analysis. Since by definition, melancholia is a disorder of the moral conscience, it is obvious the Algerian can only develop pseudo-melancholias given the unreliability of his conscience and the fickleness of his moral sense. This incapacity of the Algerian to analyze the situation, to organize a mental paranormal makes perfect sense if we refer to the two types of casually proposed by the French psychiatrist. First of all, his mental capacity. The Algerian is mentally. If we want to fully understand this basic point of departure, we must recall the seminology elaborated by the school of Algiers. The native, it says, present in the following characteristics: complete or almost complete lack of emotionality. highly credulous and suggestible, doggedly stubborn, childlike mentally minus the curiosity of the European child, prone to accidents and pathologic reactions. The Algerian is unable to grasp an overall picture. The questions he asks himself are always concerned with details and rule out any synthesis. Pointillistic, he's pointillistic, attracted to objects, lost in details, insensitive to ideas, and closed to concepts. Verbal expression is reduced to a minimum. His movements are always impulsive and aggressive, and capable of interpreting details on the basis of the overall picture. The Algerian absolutizes the component and takes one part of the whole. As a consequence, his reactions are generalizing when confronted with minor provocations or trivialities, such as a fig tree, a jester, or a sheep on his hand. The congenital aggressiveness looks for outlets and is content with the slightest pretext. It is aggressiveness in the pure state. Basically, they're reducing the Algerian or the African, or either, like I say, you can replace that with the Black American. They're reducing the African person down to basically a primitive creature who has no control over himself and just reacts. Has no full use of his brain, of the cognitive parts of his brain. It's just reaction. Like you're a Neanderthal, just out here just and reacting. This is how they're describing the Algerians, but this is also how Black people in America were described by the so-called scientific community, in the 1800s and 1900s, right? This information is important. The book is important. How the information is being described is important because it shines a light on the psychological aspects of white supremacy, the psychological aspects of racism, but also how you dehumanize a group of people. Dehumanization is important if you want to eliminate a group of people, or even if you want to colonize or dominate a group of people. You have to dehumanize them. It's hard to completely subjugate and dehumanize something that you see as human. Something that you have some kind of respect for. It's hard to take their humanity away from them. But if you don't have real respect for them, you don't have any humanity to give to them. And this is the European, right? This is the cognitive dissonance that the European is dealing with, because this is what they have to do in order to continue the colonization of African people throughout the globe. If they see us as people, it'll be a bit different for them to colonize us, right? We're doing this to human beings. Yeah. So in the April 1939 issue of Sod Medical, it was a medical journal. Perot states, in collaboration with his pupil Sutter, concurrently professor of psychiatry in Algiers, primitivism is not a lack of maturity or an interpreted development of the mental psyche. It is a social condition which has reached the ends of its evolution and is a logical adaptation to a life different from ours. Lastly, the professor addresses the very basis of the doctrine. The primitivism is not only a condition resulting from a specific upbringing, its foundations go far deeper. And we believe its substratum must lie in a specific configuration of the architectonics, or at least of the dynamic hierarchical organization of the nervous system. We have observed that the impulsiveness of the Algerian, the frequency and nature of his murders, his permanent criminal tendencies, and his primitivism are no coincidences. We are in the presence of a coherent pattern of behavior and a coherent lifestyle which can be explained scientifically. The Algerian has no cortex, or to be exact, like the inferior vertebrates, he is governed by his diencephalon. I might be saying that wrong, but the diencephalon. The cortical functions, if they exist, are extremely weak, virtually excluded from the brain's dynamics. There is therefore neither mystery nor paradox. The colonizer's reluctance to entrust the native with any kind of responsibility does not stem from racism or paternalism, but quite simply from scientific assessment of the colonized limited biological possibilities, because he's missing that frontal cortex, the all the parts of the brain that's needed for cognitive reasoning and cognitive functioning on the human level. They're saying that the Algerian or the African or even the Black American lacks. That's why we behave the way we behave. I mean, Europeans killed themselves in Europe and did all the barbaric stuff that they did because, it was survival. They had to survive. That's different. All the killing and all the violence that Europeans do throughout the world is different because, that's survival. But you Africans, you Black folk, when y'all kill people, that's due to y'all pathological nature. And that's due to y'all pathological nature. You are born criminals. You were born. So that's why, that's why we have more crime in the Black community than we have in other communities, because it's innate to us, according to Professor Perot and all the other people that he was rocking with, through their research. Hey, man, Black people kill each other and Black people kill other people like they do because they were born criminals. And this, according to them, is backed by science. Science said Black folk were born criminals. We talked about that with Dr. Joy DeGroot. Let us end this overview by requesting Dr. Carruthers, an expert from the World Health Organization, to conclude with his findings throughout Africa. This international expert collected his primary observations in a book published in 1954. So Dr. Carruthers, in conjunction with Perot, finna see what some bullshit he talking about, right? Dr. Carruthers practices in Central and East Africa, but his findings match those of the North African school. For the international expert, the African uses his frontal lobes very little. All the peculiarities of African psychiatry can be evidenced in terms of frontal illnesses. In order to make this point clear, Dr. Carruthers establishes a very vivid comparison. He puts forward the idea that the normal African is a lobotomized European. Think about that. Think about that. Think about the level of dehumanization just in that statement. The average African is a lobotomized European. Wow. It's easy to eliminate people who you think of as a lobotomized European. Most of our brain don't even work. And that is the average African. Most of your brain don't work. And you only function on the level of a lobotomized European. Wow. We know that the English-speaking schools believe they had found a radical therapy for treating certain serious mental illnesses and practicing surgical incision in front of the brain. This method has been abandoned since discovering the major damages it caused to the personality. Of course, because that shit ain't smart. Smart dummies out here doing dumb stuff. According to Dr. Carruthers, the similarity between the North African and the lobotomized European is striking. After having studied the work of various researchers practicing throughout Africa, Dr. Carruthers gives us a conclusion that establishes a uniform concept for the African. These are, he writes, the data of the cases do not fit the European categories. They are culled from several parts of Africa, east, west, north, and south. And on the whole, the writers had little or no knowledge of each other's work. Their essential similarities is therefore quite remarkable. Before concluding, it is worth pointing out that Dr. Carruthers defined the Mau Mau revolt as the expression of an unconscious frustration complex whose reoccurrence could be scientifically treated by radical psychologically appropriate methods. So it was the unusual behavior such as the Algerians' recurring criminality, the triviality of the motives and the murderous and always highly blood nature of the quarrels that posed a problem for the observers. The proposed explanation, which is now taught as part of the curriculum, seems in the last analysis to be as follows. The configuration of the North African's brain structure accounts for the indolence of the native, his mental and suicidal inaptitude, as well as his virtual animal impulsiveness. The criminal impulsiveness of the North African is the transcription of a certain configuration of the nervous system into its pattern of behavior. It is a neurologically comprehensible reaction written into the nature of things, of the thing which is biologically organized. The idleness of the frontal lobes explains his indolence, his crimes, his thefts, and his lies. And the conclusion was given to me by the sus perfect, now perfect. These instinctive beings, he told me, who blindly obey the laws of their nature must be strictly and pitilessly regimented. Nature must be tamed and not talked into reason. Discipline, tame, subdue, and now pacify are the common terms used by the colonists in the territories occupied. Because, man, they had to come in and save us from ourselves. Us wretched Africans who go around ourselves and other people, because it's just in our nature. That's how we were born. We were born to just be out here just eliminating people and just going around just being crazy. Because you heard, remember, go back. I'm gonna put the link to our video, to our Friday breakdown. I'm gonna put the link to that video on here. Remember, the young lady in that video said that Africa is in better shape because of colonization. Colonization improved Africa. But Frant Fanon, the information we're getting from Frant Fanon here is letting us know that the existence of the colonists has caused rampant mental disorders, mental psychosomatic disorders in Africans throughout the continent. Under the colonial regime, no crime is too petty for a loaf of bread or a wretched sheep. Under the colonial regime, man's relationship with the physical world and history is connected to food. In a context of oppression like that of Algeria, for the colonized, living does not mean embodying a set of values, does not mean integrating oneself into the coherent, constructive development of the world. To live simply means not to die. To exist means staying alive. Every date grown is a victory, not the result of hard work, but a victory celebrating a triumph over life. Stealing dates, therefore, or allowing one's sheep to eat the neighbor's grass is not a disregard for property rights or breaking the law of disrespect. They are attempts at murder. Once you have seen men and women in Kabalia struggling down into the valley for weeks on end to bring up soil in little baskets, so you can understand that theft is attempted and not a peccadillo. The sole obsession is the need to feel that ever shrinking stomach, however little it demands. Who do you take it in on? Who do you take it out on? The French are down on the plain with the police, the army, and their tanks in the mountains, where only the Algerians. In the mountains there are only the Algerians. So, because like he said, who do you take it out? Who do you take it out on? The French are down in the plain with the police and the army and their tanks. In the mountains are only the Algerians. Up above heaven with its promises of an afterlife, down below the French with their promises of jail, beatings, and executions. Inevitably, you stumble up against yourself. Here lies this core of self-hatred that characterizes racial conflict in segregated communities. The criminality of the Algerian, his impulsiveness, the savagery of his murders are not therefore the consequences of how his nervous system is organized or specific character traits, but the direct result of the colonial situation. It is the outcome of the trauma of colonialism. The fact that the Algerian patriots discussed this issue, that they were not afraid to challenge the beliefs inculcated in them by colonialism, that they understand each was a scream for the other in the reality they were committing suicide by pitting themselves against their neighbor, was to have an immense impact on the revolutionary consciousness. Once again, the colonized subject fights in order to put an end to domination, but he must also ensure that all the untruths planted within him by the oppressor are eliminated. In a colonial regime such as the one in Algeria, the ideas taught by colonialism impacted not only the European minority, but also the Algerian. Total liberation involves every facet of the personality. The ambush or the skirmish, The torture or the massacre of one's comrade entrenches the determination to win, revives the unconscious, and nurtures the imagination. When the nation in its totality is set in motion, the new man is not a posteriori creation of the nation, but coexists within it, matures within it, and triumphs within it. This dialectical prerequisite explains this dialectical prerequisite explains the resistance to accommodating forms of colonization or window dressing. Independence is not a magic ritual, but an indispensable condition for men and women to exist in true liberation. In other words, to master all the material resources necessary for a radical transformation of society. And that is the end of that chapter. So I just read from page 216 to 233, right? That was the section that I marked up from 216 to 233. And that will end that chapter, which is war and mental disorders. And now the last thing next week will be the conclusion. Well, actually, you know what? The conclusion ain't really that long. So we're going to just go ahead and go to the next book, to be honest. You got to read the conclusion on your own because it's really not that long. And I'm not going to do a whole video on the conclusion because you can read that on your own. Link is in the description for you to get the book. So from here, it's time for us to vote on the next book that we're going to read. So, of course, you know, I will put up the poll in the community post section so you can go vote on which book you want. You could put some suggestions of books that we probably could read in the comments and stuff. If they don't make it this cut, probably could make the future. But all in all, Frant Fanon has given us a great picture of what revolution looks like, what war looks like, what liberation looks like, what colonization looks like, right? It's a realistic look at what actually happened to African people. It's another piece of the puzzle. It's another piece of the puzzle that goes with the work of Dr. Amos, the work of Neely Fuller, the work of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, the work of Dr. Joy DeGroot, right? Another piece of the puzzle, because we're looking at the psychological components of what slavery or what violence and trauma does to a Black person. Why are we the wretched of the earth? Because we have been turned into a wretch. We've been turned into a wretch. Our circumstances, our conditions, colonization, the constant torture, the constant trauma, the constant violence, the constant beatings, and all of the mental disorders the psychosomatic disorders that will develop out of that went untreated for generations and generations and generations, passed on down to us. We are insane for a reason. It's a reason why we operate as if we are the wretched of the earth, because we have been turned into a wretch. We have. But it's up to us to break the psychological chains, but we do have to understand what has happened to us to break the chains. Learning to love ourselves and cherish ourselves and be able to protect ourselves and uplift ourselves, but we got to fix our minds. Our psyche is broke. Our minds are broke. Our spirits have long been broken. Our hearts have long been broken. We don't know what love is. We don't know what loyalty is. We don't know what caring is. We don't know what real humanity is. We have no idea because we've never experienced it. We've experienced moments of peace, but we've never experienced true humanity, because you can't treat a wretch like a human. In order to dominate a group of people, you have to dehumanize them. I said that earlier. So we've never experienced true humanity during our time here in America. And African people have not experienced true humanity since 1492. So there's a reason why we are the wretched of the earth. Book is in the description. Book link is in the description. I'll put the link to Friday's video in the description. Make sure you get the book. Make sure you check out the video. Make sure you like this video, comment, share, subscribe. Like. Hit that like button, hit that like button, hit that like button. I love you all, and moving on to our next book. I'm glad I enjoyed reading this book. One of my favorite reads so far. Probably my favorite read so far. I really enjoyed reading this book. I recommend this book to every black person. Every black person needs to read The Wretched of the Earth. Every black person needs to read it to get a better understanding of what has happened to us, not just in America, but on a global scale. But it also holds parallels to what happened to us here in America. So get your copy and get your mind right. We got to get our mind right, and we got to get on code. I love you all, and make sure y'all catch the next video coming up.